Well, welcome to the Gateway Mission podcast. We're really glad that you're listening. If this is your first time, welcome for that first time. If you come back, man, we're glad for that too. My name is Steve Rusticus. I'm the Chief Operations Officer here at Gateway Mission. And this podcast has really two simple purposes. One, we want it to be informational. We want to talk about what we do, how we do it, and most significantly, why we do what we do. And then secondly, we want to give some inspirational stories. God's at work. He's at work in and through Gateway Mission in the lives of the men, women, and children that are here. And we want you to hear about those things and be encouraged by them. We're in the midst of this series called Hope for the Homeless, in which we're digging into some of the issues that are pervasive around the guests and the folks who come in here, all of whom are homeless. And I'm joined by Scott Klingberg, and Scott is the campus director at our Gateway Women's Center. And we've just been talking about that over the last few weeks or so. We've talked about Homelessness 101. We just sort of gave some background on current situations, how homelessness is changing. We talked a little bit about visible and invisible poverty, that the things we see are significant. When people don't have a home and they don't have food, they don't have clothing, we got to deal with that. But there's those invisible things, and we want to get at interchange and transformation. So we want to deal with those things. And in our last episode, we spent some time talking about what does real help look like. And we learned that it's kind of individualized. Maybe you can talk about that a little bit and what that process is like, just as a recap, Scott.
Sure. Yeah. Steve Corbett and Brian Fickert had wrote this great book called When Helping Hurts. And, and that's kind of our topic today is about misguided compassion. But, we tend to go wrong on this. But when helping works, there's really three steps to helping. There's this idea of relief. That's providing that emergency help, that food, clothing, shelter, those emergency needs that somebody needs right now. And that's where we get stuck a lot of times. But the real help comes in what they call rehabilitation and development. Rehabilitation being those things like job training and coaching and accountability. And developing is deeper relationships that are developed in mentoring and really trying to get to a self-sufficiency. But if we get stuck on that relief part and only give out those things that are an emergency help, that truly doesn't help anybody. Then we get to actually your help hurts.
Right. So and you look at our website, you'll see things like Open Door and Pathway and our Gateway Addiction and Discipleship program that, sort of link up to those three things really. And they address those needs. And we want to walk with people into long-term change. Today, we're going to talk a kind of an odd maybe phrase. We're going to talk about misguided compassion because we want to be compassionate, but there's ways that are helpful to do it and there's ways that aren't. And one of the things we're blessed with here in the West Michigan area is people who really do want to help. They're compassionate, they're caring. They don't want people to continue to live in the challenges, especially the issues of homelessness. But there's a way in which we do that, right? There's a way in which we are compassionate, and there's misguided compassion that doesn't oftentimes help. Maybe let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that misguided compassion comes in when we tend to apply the relief instead of what's really needed. I mean, I equate it to like if I'm in a lot of pain and I go to the emergency room, I don't want just my pain to go away. I mean, that's ultimately what I want, but there's a reason for that pain. And if I go to the emergency room and they just keep giving me painkillers, that's not truly going to help me when I could have something that's fatally wrong with me. So it's that idea of not providing just that emergency relief, but getting to the deeper issues that we've talked about, what really goes on. And that comes more in the rehabilitation and development stages of help, not just stuck on that emergency relief. Because when you stay in that emergency relief, you get into this unhealthy dependency. I just become dependent on you to give me things, to provide for me. And then there's a kind of an unusual relationship develops there.
Yeah, it really masks whatever is deeper inside of people. As we talk about it, we realize that oftentimes the problems on the outside are just symptoms of the struggles on the inside, right? And we want to address those things. We're not really helping people. Robert Lupton has this book, Toxic Charity, and he talks about what happens if we kind of go down this path of addressing only the relief, and then what happens with dependency. And he talks about those 5 steps to that kind of dependency. What are those?
Yeah, those 5 steps to dependency, he really outlines it well. But you give something to somebody once and you elicit appreciation from them. They just really appreciate what you've given them. You give it to them twice, and it really begins to begin to anticipate what you're going to give them. And I've been through this journey myself. You give it to them 3 times, and then it becomes an expectation. They just really see you. They're going to expect you to give it to you. 4 times, and it becomes entitlement. Now you have to give it to me. And 5 times, you really establish dependency. Like, I can't live without what you're going to give me. And it's really a progression that happens, and we can fall into this. And when I first got involved with the homeless many years ago, I actually fell into this trap. I met some folks that were living outside, and I began to give them some money, and then I realized real quick that wasn't what they truly needed, and then we began a great relationship. But we can see this in our own lives. All of us in the last couple of years received those wonderful stimulus checks. The first time we got it was appreciated. Then they announced they were going to come out again. Mm-hmm. Well, then they were we anticipated, okay, this is going to be good, And then the next year comes and we didn't get it. And it's like, well, we were kind of expecting
where's our check?
Where's our check? Yeah. Fortunately, it ended there. But we see that same kind of thing happen when we see people in these difficult situations that just get stuck in being dependent on things. And a lot of that happens with government benefits. Yeah. Learning to be dependent on those and not having that value and dignity in themselves to move forward from that and being themselves.
Yeah, let's talk about that misguided compassion, really what it looks like for those especially who are unsheltered and homeless in our community. We talked about that in one of our episodes, that we've seen that increase, and that compassion for people frequently shows itself in, hey, I want to bring you some blankets when it's cold, and I want to bring you some food when you're hungry, and it's cold out here, so let's bring some heaters and let's do this. And it's challenging because we want to help, but it's true, isn't it? When it kind of falls into the category that we've just talked about, those 5 stages of dependency, people begin to depend on it. And so they depend on the blankets, they depend on the clothes, they depend on the heaters, and they never leave the situation that they're in, which is dangerous for them. In an unsheltered environment, it's not how God designed people to live, in this kind of environment. And right, that's sort of what we begin to see, and it's hard because we want to help.
Right. I fall victim to that myself when I first started doing this. We all want to be compassionate, but the question is, what does really compassion look like? And it's more. It leads more into that rehabilitation and development stages, as Robert Lupton has said in his book. And a lot of that comes from what we call challenge, to challenge people to do what they need to do, to take steps to move forward and invite them to do that. And that's where real compassion comes in, because we don't want to, we speak of the unsheltered people. It's certainly not a dignified way to live. It says nothing about their dignity, and the discouragement that's there. And they have lots of things that are going on. There's no doubt. Trauma in their past and mental health issues, but still they are an individual created in the image of God that are worthy of something better than living outside. And that's what we want to come along and do with them, and to, again, bring that challenge to them to move them forward.
Yeah. When we see Jesus and the way in which he encountered people, the definition of love and the way in which he loved people included these 2 things that we like to talk about is invitation and challenge, right? He drew people towards himself. He met them where they were at. And we want to meet people where they're at. But he also wanted them to live a life that was more full than what they were experiencing. And many times that takes challenge. And so we're constantly kind of calibrating those things, right? We want people to come in and be a part, but we don't want them to stay where they're at. We believe that God has more for them. So we're always doing that. So we ask some questions about, how will the help and the compassion that we're giving impact people 1 year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And so, right, we ask, will it make a difference? How does it impact?
We really want to see, we ask ourselves the question, the help that I want to give them, how is that really going to help them 10 years from now? If I provide somebody food and clothing continually, how is that going to help them 10 years from now? They've just learned they need to get food and clothing from me. That's the same kind of thing. We want to see, rehabilitation and development looks at more of that 10 years from now or 5 years from now or 1 year from now. What's really going to help you move forward? And you mentioned our programs. Our programs align with these three concepts of relief, rehabilitation, and development. Really, our open door, we have people come in, we want them to come in and get those basic needs, that emergency need. They have no food, no clothes, no place to live. We want them to come into open door and be a part of us. And Pathway gets more into that rehabilitation, and our Gateway Addictions and Discipleship program does more of the rehabilitation and development, and is really getting in depth to what their true needs are.
So what happens? Here's something we face. What happens when someone doesn't want to move forward?
That's a really good question, because that's the difficulty. If people don't want to change, we can't make them change. As much as I would want it, and I face this every day, people that we see need help, need change, but if they don't want change, they don't want help, we can't help them. And it's kind of, I thought about it, it's like being in the hospital. And if I need surgery, and that's truly what my need is, and the doctor says that, but I say, no, I don't want it, I'm leaving, and I check out against medical advice. That's really the same thing. You're saying, I don't want the help. I can't, I don't want it. I'll suffer the consequences. And I think God puts consequences in our lives for a purpose, to bring us back to what we really need. And some of that consequences is living outside, if that's the case. Sadly, it's not what we desire at all.
Yeah.
But we're not okay with them living outside in that dignified situation.
Yeah. So what you're saying is the experiencing the consequences is sometimes the necessary thing for people to go through.
Yes. That we think about that in our lives all the time. There's the old phrase, no pain, no gain. That's just the way we are. We have natural consequences to what we do.
Yeah. I mean, change in our lives frequently comes when we feel a certain amount of pain. And so, again, we calibrate that invitation and challenge as we walk with people. And we're grateful for that opportunity to be able to do that.
Yep.
Hey, we're grateful that you listen to this podcast. If you want more information, you can find it at hopefoundhere.org/podcast. If you have questions, you can go to our website and ask those. And we really hope that you listen again. Until next time.